speak a bit later on. Oh, there we go. If you have anything you'd like to say, please try using the chat function. If you have questions, pop them in there. We will have an official Q&A section later on, but we're going to have some presentations first. So if you want to pop them in the chat box, I will get back to them later on. And if appropriate, I will interject at some point with any questions, but we'll try and keep them all in the Q&A section. If you want to use any reactions during the meeting, then there is a reactions button down below. If you have any feeling on what someone says, then please use those. When we do get to the Q&A section, you're welcome to raise your hand to ask a question, as well as use the chat function, and we will try and find you and put your questions forward. I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Esme Steenkamp from Dorset Council, who will be speaking first, and Ross Fitzgerald from Jacobs, who will follow on from Esme. The aims of today's event is really to inform you on this Chesil Cove Curved Seawall project, to give you the bigger picture and the background to why a proposal is being put forward, and to give you an opportunity to talk to Esme and Ross from the project team, and also to find out more about the engagement we're doing here at Dorset Coast Forum. We as an organisation get involved in projects all along the coast to enable members of the public to be involved in them. We want to hear your points of view. I am aware that there's been a petition for this project, and we really appreciate that so many people are interested, and we would really like to direct them to come along to our sessions to find out more, and also to take part in the survey and the events that we have coming up. In terms of what's going to happen in this session, we'll have a couple of presentations. Esme will introduce the kind of picture from Dorset Council, and then Ross will go on to explain the process that's taken us to get to this point. But before that, we're going to ask you to participate in a couple of polls. These will appear throughout the presentation. We've got 3 before the presentations, and then we've got a couple afterwards, and they just help us at Dorset Coast Forum to see how these events are going and what people understand and enjoy about them. So the first one, which has appeared on your screen, and it should appear in front of your Zoom call as well, as Nikki will put it on there, is how did you hear about this event today? Nikki, if you can pop it up for me. I think she's working on it. Let me just... So in these polls, a pop-up should appear for you where you can answer the question. There is no pressure to. If you'd like to answer, please pop an answer on there. And also we're finding that when the poll is over, it may not disappear. You might need to manually close that. So the first poll is, how did you hear about this event today? Was it from local media and press, social media, email newsletters, website information, face-to-face events, an other way, or all of the above? So we've got some answers coming in. It looks like about half of you have voted so far. And social media leading at the moment. We'll just give it a couple of 30 seconds or so for everyone to participate that would like to. And I think we can see that many of you heard about this from social media, 12 of you, 7 saw in the local media and press, and there has been some press coverage for this project. 4 of you saw an email newsletter, 4 of you have been on the DCF website, and 6 of you found it another way. If you are happy to pop the other method you found out about the event in the chat box, it'd be really helpful for us to see where people are finding out about our events. Perfect. Nikki, is that the final result? I think so. We can close that. So you may find that you need to manually close this on your own screen. And then there's a poll number 2. This one, we want to know, what's your connection to Chesil Cove? We're really interested to know who's getting involved with this project and who's having their say. The answers are local resident Chesil and Fortuneswell, local resident Portland, local resident Other Dorset. Are you a beach hut owner or user? Are you on holiday? Do you work or have business in Chesil Cove? Are you a day visitor or an other? We'll just give that a little bit of time to work through so that everyone can have a chance to vote. Perfect, and I think most of you have voted. So lots of residents here, thank you for coming along. 14 of you, 11 from Portland and 4 from other areas of Dorset, that's great. We have some beach hut owners and users here, 9 of you, which is really helpful. And hopefully this will give you loads more information that you need on this project. So one more poll, because I don't want to cause death by polls today. Poll number 3, so if you close number 2, poll number 3 is, what is your level of understanding of the coastal processes at Chesil Cove? And so if you can just give us a steer on what your level of understanding on this is, hopefully you can come away from today's meeting with a bit more information on that. Fabulous. Okay, I think most of you have done it. Okay, so 39% of you have basic knowledge, 29 have good, and then 26% of you have very good knowledge. So we have some good knowledge in the room, and hopefully we can all come away with a little bit more today. We will ask this question again at the end just to see if that has changed. Now, I'm going to pass over to Esme now, who is going to give you an overview of the start of the project and where it's at so far. So Esme, if you'd like to join us.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I'm the Coastal Risk Manager for Dorset Council. So as such, I head up the team of engineers who are responsible for the coastal defence and harbours infrastructure of the council. I just wanted to introduce you a little bit to the team and give some background for the project. So I'm the manager of the coastal risk team. Ian Fitz, who is a project engineer in my team, has been tasked with this project. Now I give him support and steer on this project. Then we have Jacobs, who is our consultant on the project, and they bring out their specialist knowledge to it. And Ross Fitzgerald is here tonight with us to discuss more of the technical detail. So there are members of the core project team here tonight, but I just need to note that there are almost a dozen other people that work behind the scenes and are involved in the project, and they are mostly from scientific, environmental, planning and engineering backgrounds, and they all contribute to this project from their perspective, specialist fields and knowledge. So Ross is going to get into the meat and bones of the project after this, but I just wanted to give some context to everybody here tonight on where this project are and where it is coming from. So Nikki, if you can just give the next slide, thank you. In 2011, the Chesil Cove Seawall refurbishment study summary report was done. It's a mouthful. It was undertaken to assess the existing condition of the structure and identify possible options for refurbishment. That study and report found that the structure was in an overall good and fair condition, and it had about 15 to 20 years of residual lifetime left. That report, however, did also note that the exposed toe piling at the southern end of the wall is a matter of concern. That report also identified a number of refurbishment options. They ranged from reprofiling slopes, ground anchors, and rock revetment and cementatious coating and things like that. But at the time, the economic appraisal found that the interventions were premature at that point of the structure's lifetime. And then in 2070, the site was revisited, and that Chesil Cove desk study and preliminary geomorphological, I always struggle with that word, assessment report was compiled. This may have been the result of the 2011 report noting that analysis of the slope stability was undertaken using limited data. The geomorphological assessment also made further recommendations. Amongst other them was ground investigations and monitoring, ground surface monitoring, and then probabilistic assessment of future seawall failure and landslide reactivation. In 2021, the council then commissioned Jacobs to undertake a strategic level assessment of coastal defence options. and that followed the concerns of further erosion and undermining at the southern end of the wall. The assessment made the case for intervention and put forward a list of engineering options, and that is why we are here tonight then, because from that followed Dorset Council making available money to pursue an outline business case. Now, what is an outline business case? That it is a funding application to the Environment Agency. The council cannot afford to refurbish or do work to the wall entirely, so we need external funding to do any work. This outline business case also dictates and organize a structured process according to which we approach the problem and find a solution. It is therefore concerned with thinking, evidencing and documenting what you are doing. So, like I said, the central government makes funds available for councils to access and do coastal infrastructure projects. As such, the document is very, very prescriptive and structured, and it is done on a predetermined template, and there are predetermined information that needs to go into it. It is therefore a very structured mechanism for us through which we can approach an engineering problem and determine its solutions. It takes into account things like economic, financial, social, environmental, and planning impacts as well. This is also true. Sorry, this is also true for the design criteria and the design life of a structure. And the document and the process prescribes the level of defense and the design life that must be maintained for the structure. The project team is therefore guided by this process and by this document, and we can't just put forward options that we think is best. We have to comply with all these criteria, and during the process, we have to also engage with many stakeholders and statutory consultees. The project, therefore, as it stands here tonight, is in a conceptual stage whereby we propose an engineering solution, and that solution must then pass a number of considerations of environmental planning and engineering in nature. Nikki, the next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a bit of a strategic context to the project. There is the National Shoreline Management Plan, and for this section of the coast, it is an hold the line policy. So that enables us to actively intervene when it is necessary. We're also busy with the flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy that covers Portland, Underhill to Wyke Regis, of which this location forms part of the area of that strategy. And then we've got the West Dorset and Weymouth and Portland local plan of 2015. Now, there is a specific key strategic objective in that plan that I would like to highlight to the audience here. And it reads, protect and enhance the outstanding natural and built environment, including its landscape, biodiversity and geodiversity, and the local distinctiveness of places within the area. This will be the overriding objective in those areas of the plan which are particularly sensitive to change. And this is, in my view, very applicable to this location and this project that we are busy with. There's a number of environmental designations at that location, and that gives rise to key areas of concern that needs to be addressed. Therefore, with our business case and our business plan that is submitted, there will also be supporting documentation that will address these key areas for consideration as they are and those documents are noted there in the presentation. So that's your preliminary environmental information report, ecological walkway survey, preliminary water framework directive assessment, landscape and visual appraisal, including the environmental site appraisal plan, heritage appraisal, and then details of the proposed work. So Nikki, if you can just get me the last slide, please. So the project going forward, we are hoping to finalize this document by the end of this year, after which it has to be reviewed by the cabinet and approved, because the cabinet has to put forward funds towards the project. After that, we will submitted to the EU for approval, which will then unlock the funding that we wish to unlock for this project. Then planning and detailed design will follow in June 2025, and hopefully construction in the autumn of winter 26-27. I think it's just important to note at this stage as well is that the planning and design stage will come with its own rounds of engagements. There is many licensing and approvals that needs to be obtained before we can go do anything. And that includes also a public engagement process under which we will put the designs forward to the public for input. And this project, like any other development in Dorset, will go through the regular planning application process of the council. So that is where we are at the minute. And I will hand over to Ross now to give you the technical information of the project. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Esme, and thank you everyone for having me along. And hello, let me just share my screen now. Bear with me one moment. This one here. Let's put that in slideshow. Could somebody give me the thumbs up that you could see a large orange slide? Excellent. Okay, I shall proceed. So yes, I'm Ross Fitzgerald. I'm from a civil engineering company called Jacobs. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm a geomorphologist. So I study land surface change and coastal processes, slope processes, and things. I first got involved in the projects in 2016 to do a geomorphological assessment, and I was the author of the report that that Esme just mentioned, and I've been involved on and off ever since. What I want to do today is present some slides that give you the background, the last 8 years of assessments and monitoring that have built up the evidence to support the potential ways forward that we're going to we're hoping to take. This isn't a done deal. The money hasn't even been secured yet. So just good to make that clear as well. So I'm going to do a bit on site history, background to the site. I'm going to look at the ground investigation that we did, the monitoring data that we've collected, and the various site inspections. And what we're going to do is identify the causes of damage to the seawall at Chesil Cove. I should also add it's a very robust structure that's had an amazing design life, and really our approach from the very start has been to preserve the structure because of those reasons. So we'll come back to that. We're also going to look at coastal defence and slope stabilisation options at Chesil Cove for the future. And I think, as Esme said, the aim is to protect the natural beauty and the amenity of the site and impact things as little as possible. Okay, so a bit on the history. So the image on the right shows the site. The large red dashed polygon highlights the area of the 1857 West Weirs landslide. This was a deep-seated, so a landslide that was seated deep beneath the surface that thrust out the large debris load that you can see superimposed on the sea there. Over the next 100 years, this debris was gradually eroded back to the coastline by about the late 1950s. And at this point, coastal erosion started again of the actual slope itself. And this kick-started a lot of debris slides and mudslides and things. And that's the reason why the seawall was put in the first place. So the cause of the 1857 slide was loss of tow weight. So as the coast erodes, you lose the force that resists the landslide because the weight at the back of the slope starts winning. So that is what although the seawall isn't designed to stabilize the slope, it's a coastal defense structure. It's vitally important in preventing sort of deep-seated landslides and shallow landslides. So this is a natural and cyclic process that goes on. Okay, next is just a few of Stuart Morris's photos from around the time of the seawall construction. So thank you for Stuart for providing these. The one at the top and the one at the bottom left show the slope. So here we can see mudslides and compression ridges and tension cracks in the slope before the seawall was put in place, which illustrates the point I was just making. And the more of this material that is lost to coastal erosion, the more you destabilize the wider landslide system that goes all the way up to the headscarp, which is, you know, the top of those mining dumps, sort of piles of rock. The bottom right image, we can see a haul road and a digger at work when the seawall was being constructed. Okay, next, so seawall damage. So top left image is a colleague of mine. We started a process years ago of measuring the erosion of the foreshore platform. So this isn't the beach. We know the beach moves on and offshore. So when you get a storm, the beach gets drawn into the near shore. During calmer conditions, it gradually gets returned. So the beach goes on and offshore all the time. But what happens when the beach is offshore? The clay underneath gets worn away. And as the clay gets worn away, the seawall, which wasn't designed to have the clay being worn away, loses support because the seawall's foundations are in this clay. The top right image or photograph shows the piles which are quite badly corroded now because they're exposed, and there are holes in these. And we think that because of this, that the material behind the piles that support the rock apron and the promenade, we're losing material from that. And we'll see an image in a minute that shows what happens when that occurs. We've got the cracks in the wing wall, bottom left image. So these have been there a very long time, but we've been monitoring them and they're widening, which, you know, a structure like this, that shouldn't happen. So there's definitely something going on there, which I'll come back to. Bottom right photograph. This shows shallow earth pressure. So this isn't a deep-seated failure. This is a shallow one that's pushing over the rear retaining wall. And I'll come back to why I'm showing that in a minute. The map with the oranges and greens on the right shows beach change over the last 15 years. So although the beach moves on and offshore periodically, there is superimposed on this a longer term loss of beach material, whereby the oranges at the southern end of the seawall show that we're generally over time losing material. And again, the beach doesn't support the seawall, but the problem here is that for larger parts of the year, typically the shore platform's getting eroded more, the clay, and this is the problem, the loss of that clay. So the seawall is still robust, but it just needs a bit of help to see out the next 100 years, and that's a big point. So when we do these sorts of projects, we have to consider the next 100 years. So bear that in mind as we go forwards. So last one here, I'm just going to get the pointer. Has that worked? No, it hasn't. Laser pointer. Here we go. So if you follow the rim of the rock apron here, which has been repaired a couple of times, you'll see that the promenade undulates. And the reason that that is settling is because material has been lost from below here, probably out from under the seawall through the piles. And that could be a really big problem because you're kind of being eroded from behind, essentially. Okay. Next, this just makes the point about, so this is the augmentation works at the southern end of the seawall. And this was sat, there's no foundations, but it was sat on the clay. Basically, this is all completely eroded away now. And I know Ian's been measuring this in recent years. We've actually stopped measuring it because there's nothing to measure anymore. There's no clay left there at all. So this is a problem, and it has left the stairs and things, what we term the augmentation works, they're actually hanging off of the structure, which isn't good. Here's top right are the locations of where we were measuring the downwearing. And here is a plot showing the cracks slowly widening on the wing wall. Okay, so next, this slide makes the point that what's happened, although the seawall was excellently designed and built, it perhaps wasn't we weren't able to predict in the 60s that the coast was going to erode and leave the southern end of the seawall proud of the alignment of the beach, so sort of unprotected. So this just makes that point that really this is the problem area here, where we're seeing that the structure is slowly kind of falling forwards, not falling, that's over egging it, sort of slowly rotating forward because of this loss of support here. It was originally thought, and the reason I was involved, because I deal with landslides a lot, was that there was a landslide behind it that was pushing it over, but this isn't actually the case. So those cracks I showed you on this wing wall here, and you can imagine if the earth pressure was coming from upslope, these wouldn't open up, they'll be compressed together. So it's actually the fact that the front of the seawall, the seaward facing bit, is losing support, that it's slowly kind of falling over. So next here, I'm just going to show a couple of images of beaches. I think this was a particularly stormy winter when a lot of the beach is offshore, and you can start to pick out some of the clay here. What's interesting here is there's a lot of rock that's naturally deposited and some from earlier or repair works. Now, this isn't a million miles different from what is actually being proposed. It's rock that comes up to roughly a metre below the top of the wing wall. What will be different is it will be bigger bits of rock, not larger in scale overall, but bigger so that they don't get washed away, so that they last a long time. But really, what we're proposing isn't a million miles different from what's been seen before. It is different, but not, you know, it's not completely out of the ordinary. This is the summer before, when the beach is healthy. So this is natural. This happens most years. Okay, so my structural colleagues did a structural report on the seawall, and essentially, in layman's terms, because that's how I need to view it, because I'm not a structural engineer, but essentially the southern end here is slowly rotating forward because of loss of support. The northern end, all of the master joints between the waver terminals, so these are the big chunky bits of concrete along the front, they're actually in compression because the shallow failures are pushing into it. So essentially there's torsion being applied to the seawall. Okay, ground investigation. I was also involved in this. I think it was 2021. We basically had a load of boreholes that return core samples, which you can see on the right here. And here is a nice failure of landslide shear surface at depth down this sort of grey Kimmeridge clay. We also did some geophysics, which is various probes and things that kind of look to sample this and corroborate what we're seeing in the sort of physical data. And what we're trying to do is build a ground model. What's happening beneath the ground? Are there shear surfaces? What depth are they at? How quickly are they displacing? Are they responding to rainfall? That kind of stuff. So here's the site again. Here are the boreholes. You'll see some of them are in pairs. This is where we did a physical borehole to extract a core, and the other one was for geophysics. You've also got a couple on the seawall itself. So in the next slide, you're going to see a ground model, which is a cross section through the ground at depth along that blue profile. So like I'm slicing through the seawall up the slope right the way up to the A354 at the top. So what we're seeing here is in the first 5 meters, you've got the remnants of the shallow failures that occurred in the 1950s, early 60s. So they are pushing up against the back of the seawall, but they are not the cause of the problem, as we'd see that those cracks would tend to close if it was the driving force. Then this thicker red dotted line, which actually goes below the foundations of the seawall, this is the 1857 landslide. And we are picking up slow creep on this. And the worry is if the seawall is damaged and erosion gets in behind it, which granted wouldn't happen quickly, it wouldn't just disintegrate. We're not saying that, but bear in mind we have to consider 100 years. If erosion got in behind it and you started losing tow weight material to coastal erosion, then the weight at the back of the slope begins to win, and you could get an 1857 style big failure, which could eat into the cliff and endanger the road. I'll come back to that. There's another dotted line here at depth that we found, and that is probably from an earlier ancient landslide when sea levels were lower, and that's nothing to worry about at all. Oh, none of them are anything to worry about. as long as we keep the seawall in place. So these, lots of things here, but I've just shown some pictures of some of the geophysics which look down the hole and they find these disturbed areas where the ground is moving. And this is a shallow one in borehole one. So this is in the seawall. This shows that over a couple of years, just over 2 years, that the seawall has moved just over a centimetre at the southern end towards the sea, which isn't alarming, but it's obviously not great. And it's at the depth where we're seeing the shear in the ground, and also at the depth we're seeing it in the cores. So these lines of evidence stack up to prove the ground model and what we're seeing. Here's borehole 5, so this is further up the slope, and the reason I've got this one, don't worry, I won't go through loads of these. We're also picking up that shallow earth movement, this case at just over 5 meters, so a bit deeper here, but we're also picking up below the depth of the foundations of the seawall this deeper 1857 landslope, which is creeping very slowly, and we really don't want that. We don't want to lose any of the coast to encourage this to happen. And again, it's backed up in the logs and things. I won't labour through all of that. This is a summary, schematic summary of the direction and rate of movement. And it really backs up the structural report in the fact that there is earth pressure being directed into and behind the seawall. And the seawall itself, the southern half, is moving forwards towards the sea, which we definitely don't want. And this end, although we don't have a borehole in the actual seawall, that doesn't seem to be happening. So there's this kind of twist happening to the seawall. And again, all of the lines of evidence stack up. They all make sense in context of one another. I think I've had this one already, haven't I? So this is just explaining the different forces on the seawall at each end. This is the shallow earth pressure. So here you've got 3 to 4 meters of shallow movement, and this is what's causing the damage at the rear of the seawall. Right, the next thing, and again, not being alarmist at this, but this is potentially what could happen. So what we noticed a few years ago is that you were getting cracks open up and gullies opening up behind, in between the crest of the slope and the road. That's developed, so there's now quite extensive tension cracking and quite big voids opening up and things. And the problem is, so this area here, so we have the road at the top of the picture. The purple line is the cliff we see, but it's not a natural cliff. This is in fill material and quarry waste. The white line here is the natural cliff line. Where it's a dotted white line, that's where we hypothesize the natural cliff line is. We can't see it, but it's back here somewhere. And the worry is all of this unnatural stuff isn't particularly stable. So you can imagine if the slope below is moving, that this could be lost quite quickly. That's, very likely. Now, if I draw your attention over here, here's a topple of the natural cliff, and these are all over the place, and they're about 20 meters wide, and that is because of the joint spacing in the rock. So you could imagine if you lost all of this and you expose this bit to the natural process, you might lose another 20 meters. And bear in mind, we're looking at 100 years. We have to base what we're doing, our business case, on 100 years. This 50 meters total to where the road is, it isn't looking so healthy. So really we are reliant on the seawall to protect access. Again, I don't want to be alarmist. This sort of thing isn't going to unravel quickly, but we have to consider the 100 years. Next, I'll just whiz through some of the options. So this is a full seawall replacement. Excuse my terrible drawing that makes it look like it's floating. I guess the point I'm trying to convey here with my bad art is that anything new you build would have to go in behind the current seawall to align with where the beach wants to be now and in the future, which means it'd have to be very tall. It would be an enormous structure. It would have massive implications and disruption. So that was it also triggers all sorts of environmental and heritage problems. So it's really, really not a solution we wanted to an avenue we want to go down. There's a partial replacement, which essentially has all the same problems. It's really very disruptive. We then have a series of options where we propose to repair the seawall and then protect it with some rock, so we get a long life out of it, far longer than the original design life. So we've got a rock apron option, which kind of blends into the natural rock habitat. We've got a terminal groin and reef option. The problem with this is that the water's so deep here that you need an enormous amount of rock. So it's very expensive, and it triggers, working in the nearshore here, all sorts of environmental problems. So that wasn't favoured. We've got a rock revetment and a repair. So this is the kind of thing that's on the table. This is where the business case has gone. Something a lot more modest, but well designed to protect the coast. You've got an offshore reef option. This is similar to the terminal groin and reef. It triggers all sorts of problems environmentally and with cost. And we've gone through, as Esme said, a process of assessing all of these, the pros and cons of all of these. And here's a list of just some of the things. So you've got, how much does it cost? Can you build it? Can you maintain it? Does it, how much does it improve coastal defence? How much does it improve the stability of the whole slope? Because remember, we're trying to preserve the amenity of the whole slope and the assets adjacent. You've got, does it trigger environmental and heritage issues, etc., etc., etc. I won't labour through these because you can see the slides, but you know, there's a long list of things that we have to consider. So really, we get back to the preferred option. I'm going to start top right. We're going to remove, or we hope to, this is not signed and sealed, we hope to remove the augmentation works to stop them pulling the structure over. We're going to put in a new sheet pile in front of the current one to protect it from coastal erosion, and so that the material under the seawall cannot escape. We're going to repair the cracks. We're going to repair any other concrete bits, and we're going to put a rock apron or revetment, similar, it's just a different name, in front of it. And the final thing from me, and I'm sorry I've overrun a little bit, so this is approximately the footprint. Again, nothing is signed and sealed, but this is approximately the footprint. By my reckoning, this red polygon I've just added on is the rock that I could see in the photo I'm going to show you next, and I've shown you before. So again, I don't think it's completely you know, I don't think it's this enormous and sort of scary structure. We really are trying to minimize the scale of this and the impact of it. And there will be, you know, there's no design done yet, so there will be opportunities to hopefully improve this further. So that polygon represents this rock here. Now it is different rock and it will be larger rocks, but anyway, I think that makes the point. I think that's it for me. Sorry, I have gone a bit over.
No problem at all, Ross. Now, thank you very much for that. Now, we are now entering our question and answer section. I'll just wait for Ross, if you can stop sharing, and we head back to Nikki. A reminder in the interim, if you have any questions that you'd like to pop in our chat box, please go ahead. We will ask any on your behalf from the chat box. If anybody has any questions they would like to ask themselves, please raise your hand using the hand raise function, and I will come and find you and we will get you to ask your question. And if you have any reaction to anyone's question or answer, please use the reactions function. Now, I'm just taking a look. If there are any questions, please go ahead. Okay, first one. I can see Fiona Godley. If you would like to ask a question yourself, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that very clear presentation and lots of good information. I'm a hut owner. I just wondered if Ross, you could just clarify. You talk about the apron and the revetment, and your diagrams seem to make the apron, you know, very discreet along the seawall, and the revetment also quite small. But the pictures I had seen previously suggested that the revetment would extend right towards Quiddles. So that seemed to be different. If you could just clarify the exact extent of the proposed revetment. And I'm sure other people will want to ask this, but can you also talk about the nature of the stone you're planning to use? because, you know, I understand obviously that granite is more hard wearing than Portland stone, but is also, you know, not natural to the area and not so aesthetically delightful.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Good questions. So I guess the question on the footprint and the extent of the structure, there's no detailed design yet, so that's, you know, can change a lot. But it's true to say that it would probably be at maximum about 25 meters deep. So that is from the edge of the seawall towards the sea. 25 meters, not high, 25 meters. What was that? Yeah, deep. And the idea is that we go 80 meters. I think this is about 2/3 of the way from the south towards the north, so not all the way to Kiddles. Now, it might be that in the future, in 40 years or something, as coastal erosion continues, you might need to do more. You know, I wouldn't count that out, but that's the extent. The other question, remind me, so I've gone blank.
It was regarding the type of rock used, Ross.
Type of rock, right? Okay, so this was explored actually, and quite incredibly, because there's precedent for using granite, you're allowed to use granite, despite the fact that this is one of the most heavily protected, and rightly so, sites in the country. You can use granite. We explored using Portland rock. Under the proviso that we know that it would need maintenance, you know, we know that you'd need to replace it because it would break up sooner, but it just doesn't pass any of the rock standard. So basically, you can't get anybody to design it for you because they can't sign it off. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it can't be explored further in the future, because this is at the start of the process. As I say, there's not even funding at the moment. But we very much thought that Portland stone would be something to look into. But yeah, at the moment, it's hit snag. So it's the plan is for granite at the moment.
Great, thank you, Ross. If there's anyone else that would like to raise a hand, otherwise I will go to the chat box because we have a few questions there. Just one from up there. Why are you applying for EU funding when we were no longer in the EU? I think this one's for you, Esmery, and I think it may have been that you were misquoted, but if you'd like to answer.
My apologies if I misspoken. It is EA, the Environment Agency. So central government has a funding program that it lasts over 6 years. So it's in 6-year cycles. And in that cycle, they make an X amount of money available, and then councils can bid for that money to do work on coastal defences. And it's called the Flood Defence and Grant in Aid. That is the funding that we are bidding for here.
Great, thank you, Esmery. Now I can see that Jane has raised her hand. If you'd like to ask the question, Jane.
Yep, can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Hi, Ross, thank you. I did find that very informative, actually. And certainly I have learned a little bit about the movements in that area, so thank you. So when the proposal was put to us first, there were 5 options, and I can quite understand why you didn't go for options 1 or 2, which clearly would have looked a whole lot worse. I was hoping 1 or 2 were more modest, but clearly they're not. You've shown us proposal 3 and 4, but the council have told us they're proposing to take on 3 and 5. And the proposal 5 seemed to have a very large revetment that pretty much swallowed the entire cove between the southern end of the cove wall and the steps. Now, I appreciate you haven't yet gone into design mode, so things might end up looking better or worse. I think the concerns of the community is really the loss of amenity to the beach, and whatever you do there, that is a loss of amenity to us. If you put a revetment between Quiddles and the southern steps, there is no question of that. The little diagram you showed us, where you said it wasn't a million miles away, doesn't seem to quite accord with the information that we were given from the outset. So I guess I'm asking a bit the same question as Fiona, but it's really quite an important question, because one loses us the amenity altogether. I think I would really implore you to look as hard as possible in using Portland stone. I think grey black granite on this corner is going to look a bit like a port, you know, the breakwater of a port, rather than Chesil Beach. So all my points are about the aesthetics. You know, I can accept that maybe we need more reinforcement there, but does it have to go that far along? And even if it lasts only 40 years instead of 100, we may have better solutions in 40 years than we have now.
Yeah, Jane, thanks. Those are all really good points, and we're very much aligned with that. We want to minimise the footprint. We want to minimise disruption, and Portland stone would be much. It would be much better. After all, it would be there naturally. If the landside was naturally operating and there was no seawall, you'd have the foreshore armoured with Portland stone. I think the problem we have is that you do, as the responsible authority, Dorset Council do have to, on a hold the line coastline, they do have to put in place a robust defence. And to get funding through the EA, you have to follow the guidelines and you have to tick all the boxes. So I think at the moment, the business case will have granite in it, but I very much support that at detailed design in the future, in future years, that we revisit the Portland stone and we ask the question of the EA, okay, so you want us to this to last 100 years, but if you considered this alternative, and in actual fact, we even approached the local quarry about using Portland stone, so that's still very much on the agenda.
Is there any possibility of putting a base of granite and cover it with Portland stone? So from the aesthetics, so almost just for a cosmetic end point.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's something that can definitely, that's a really good idea that we can take on board and look into. It's not been done before, but yeah, we can certainly look into that. With regards to the footprint, again, we want to minimise it, but the reason it goes from the seawall to 25 metres offshore and 80 metres, so 2/3 of the way up the seawall towards Kiddles, is it's about armouring that sort of vulnerable to erosion Kimmeridge clay foreshore, and you need to go far enough down the foreshore so that your rock itself doesn't get undermined. So those are the boxes we have to tick in outline design. It's not detailed at all. To get funding to protect the coast, because there's a fair amount of assets and other things at risk here, and it's obviously very important. But really good points that we can take on board. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you, Jane. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I think you could answer quite quickly, Ross, that sort of follow on. So the first of which is, will the beach still be as usable for swimmers, divers, and dog walkers? Which hoping you might be able to answer.
Yes. I mean, I think that you may lose it. You're going to lose some, there's no doubt. How much ultimately that will be is a bit of an unknown. I think the earlier drawings, and they're all my terrible drawings, I'm no designer or artist, probably do overestimate it, because we don't want to put things out there. It would be wrong to draw a picture of something and then it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger over time. We'd look to, this is worst case, let's minimize it as much as possible, but you are going to lose some beach amenity, but there is a lot of adjacent beach, and there is a lot of amenity value in the area behind that we're sort of trying to protect. So with regards diving specifically, I guess the divers are looking to dive on the rocks to the immediate sort of offshore and south of the seawall. Now, it might be that their entry and exit of the waters in a slightly different location, but I don't think it's going to disrupt that very much. But I am not a diver, so you have to understand that there's not an awful lot of basis for that, but that would be my initial feeling, at least.
Great. And Alex, we appreciate that question, and we have heard much feedback about the quality of the swimming at Chesil Cove, and that a lot of people are using that, so it is important. The other question that I think you can answer quickly is, why was no borehole positioned within the seawall?
there's two through the seawall that are picking up, that are recording, have been recording for 5 years the movement in the seawall. So there are two. So we've got a good data set on that. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ross. Now there's somebody called Zoom user with their hand up. If you would ask your question and let us know who it's for.
Hi, I think I may be the Zoom user. I don't use Teams normally, so I'm not very familiar with Zoom. My name's Max. I also a local resident. I want to come back to this 100-year design life. It does seem to me that the reason we've got this proposal to put breakwater boulders on the beach made of granite, and I think they're I'd be interested if you could provide us later with some information about the size of these boulders, because I think they're very much larger than is being conveyed. But I want to come back to this 100-year design life, which you said was far longer than the original design life of the sea wall. And it seems to me, reading between the lines, that the reason you're designing for 100 years is because that's the only way you can get the money from the EU, from the EA rather. And,
exactly.
And that's a very bad reason to design for 100 years. I mean, 100 years is forever. We don't design office blocks for 100 years. We don't design offshore wind farms for 100 years. The normal design life of an offshore wind farm is 25 years. So this is a ridiculously long period of time. And of course, it does result in good engineers saying, I'm going to have to put thousands of tons of rock on the beach in order to make sure that nothing goes away. I think we need a far smaller scheme which doesn't involve rocks on the beach, because the beach is everything. The beach is not some kind of nice have swimming place. It's the reason that Portlanders are proud of where they live. So we need to unpack this design life and work out how much it would cost, for example, just to do the repairs, the underpinning, the little bit of steel that has got reinforcement that's exposed, and rusty tops of cheap piling, which, to be honest, from an engineering point of view, I'm also not an engineer, but I do know something about this, is kind of not that big. You could repair the wall without putting all this tons of rock down, and it would probably last very well 40 years, or as long as what have we got? It was built in 1965. So I'd really like you to unpack for us, if all it is the reason you're over designing, and it is over engineered, is because that's the only way you can get money. That really is putting the cart before the horse. What you should be doing is an engineering scheme which utterly preserves the beach. And then we work out how we find the money and on the basis of what it costs. But far the biggest financial component of this is going to be the rock dump, because you're going to have to bring rock from France in barges and then place it over months and months and months. And it will be the most expensive bit, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It will be 90% of the cost. I don't deny that at all. Your initial question on the size of the rock, there would need to be 10-ton boulders involved. They won't all be that size. The leading edge will need to be, because the wave environment is so energetic at this site. Unfortunately, it isn't just 100-year. It's a really, really good observation. But the problem is the major problem is the coastal erosion. So you imagine every year, or following the really big storms, the beach is pulled offshore, and the residents would have seen it. The grey Kimmeridge clay is exposed and it is downworn. The only way that we know of to stop that happen is to armor it with rock. Now, yeah, you could argue, I think it's a very good point, that perhaps if you could go with local big Portland rocks from quarry waste that's just up the road, you'd still need the footprint. You'd still need to armor that foreshore to stop the problem, and that really is the honest truth. But it would be cheaper. It would be at least natural to the environment. You wouldn't lose any less beach. It would be cheaper, and the design life would be shorter, because that rock will break up more quickly. But it's a big job. It could take us 5 years to persuade the Environment Agency on this. So I guess our approach is, let's secure the funding. We'll keep in the background that on the agenda, and we'll keep pushing for, can we use this? Can we change the design standards? Can you consider a different benefits period rather than 100 years? Because, you know, obviously a structure of this size, it's very big, it's very robust. It's not, even if part of it broke, the thing isn't just going to disappear. There's absolutely no way. But we've seen at lots of other sites that as soon as the sea finds a weak spot and can get round in behind or through something, then it can start problems. And as the authority responsible for this, they, you know, Dorset Council just cannot take that route. So hopefully I've answered some of those questions.
Well, you haven't really, because I did say that what I'm interested in is a solution that isn't putting the cart before the horse, which isn't saying, in order to get the money, I have to guarantee nothing will happen for 100 years. That's too long, and that results in an over-engineered solution that destroys our historic and internationally renowned beach and our bathing position, which is the best bathing spot in the whole island. We don't need a solution that lasts 100 years. We don't design for things for 100 years. You know, that is not how engineers design things normally. As I said, you don't design offshore wind farms for 100 years. You design them for 25 years. And I think we need a solution which puts a concrete cap over the exposed steel. If you want to put more sheet piles, if you want to do some underpinning, fine. Nobody's going to argue against that. And if it lasts 40 years or 30 years, everybody would be delighted, because
Max,
what we don't want to lose is our beach.
Yeah, unfortunately, that won't deal with the problem, though. The key problem is the downwearing of the beach, and that can only be solved with rock armour. And you will not get, the Environment Agency will not invest in anything that does not deal with the fundamental problem. And this isn't about design. You could do a Portland stone job on this that would give you a 30 or 40-year design life, but you would still need to cover the beach. And there might be ways of making it a bit smaller, but I don't want to sit here and promise to you that yeah, okay, we can do a tiny little structure, and because the fundamental problem is that Kimmeridge clay needs to be isolated from the erosion.
Okay,
and
well, Ros,
yeah.
I understand that, and I guess then we need to look at the fundamental problem. Could you release Jacobs Engineering's report in full with all the appendices and schedules so that we can consider it from an engineering perspective? Because the slides are very helpful. I found the whole presentation very enlightening, and we're really grateful to you all for doing it, but I'd actually like to check the engineering.
Well, yeah, it's geomorphology at the moment. It's not a design.
No, but I asked you if you could release the report.
I can't, because it's not released. It's in progress. Well,
I'm talking about the one in 2021 that was produced, and the one which has all the proposals for the various schemes.
Oh yeah, no
and
problem. They're all public,
the analysis of the borehole data. That's what we need to be able to get peer reviewed by another engineer. So if you could produce all of that and release it into the public domain, that would be really helpful. And it may well be that we come around and think that absolutely, you know, something along these lines is inevitable. But, you know, if I have two engineers, I often get different positions put forward by different engineers. There's no one solution. You yourself have come up with 5. The original engineer who designed the rock wall in 1965, he's retired now, but he thinks it's over-engineered, and he thinks you've misunderstood what's happening here. So I think the least we could have is the community have an opportunity to run a slide rule over the evidence base supporting these schemes.
I have to interject just because we are now over time. We will certainly look into this, and I know Ross will have some responses. We have many other questions in the chat box that we have now run out of time for. So for those of you that have put a question in the chat box, we will work through those over tomorrow and the rest of this week, and we will come back to you, as I'm afraid that we are out of time and I'll need to move on. But I appreciate that not everybody's questions have been answered. I want to pass back to Esme, and I just want to highlight at this point that we are doing an in-person drop-in on Wednesday as well. If you feel that you would like to come along to that, the presentations will be the same, but we will actually be there to answer questions as well. But I'll just quickly pass back to Esme, who can give a final update, and thanks to Ross for answering many questions there.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Ross. Yeah, so I kind of jumped the gun a little bit on the way forward on the project. I need to reiterate once again that this is an outline business case, so we have to play the rules according to the game that we are playing, and that is, like Ross said, the 100-year. At the minute, myself and my team, we don't have a mandate for any other thing. We don't have a mandate to put forward lesser scope solutions and things like that. It is important to remember that should we secure funding and we go into detailed design, then we go through an engagement process as well, and these things can most certainly be picked up there. Like I said, we don't have a mandate to move outside what the parameters of what the OBC process is giving us at the minute. It also needs to be said that there is a shoreline management plan that has got a hold the line policy. So we also have to comply with that and find guidance in that policy document, because that is the overall national plan for how coastal erosion should be managed along the UK coast. Elaine, thank you very much, and we'll collate those questions and then put together a response to them.
Certainly, yes. And I want to just reiterate that we will look at all of this and we will feed back. I just want to remind everyone that for the remainder of for the next steps in the project from us at Dorset Coast Forum, many of you may have seen our webpage, and we have a survey on there that we would welcome for you to complete to have your say on this Chesil Cove project. We will be recording today's session, so that will be uploaded to the webpage as soon as we can, so that anybody who hasn't been here today can listen back to that, or anybody that would like to listen again and see the presentations again will be able to see it. And we have our in-person drop-in on Wednesday. Nikki will pop the survey link into the comments. I think she can get to that in just a second. A reminder that is on Wednesday from 1:30 till 4 p.m. at the Portland Community Venue. And just to reiterate, we're connecting with young people in Portland through Outdoor Classroom Day. There are a couple of polls that we have left to do at the end very quickly. Sorry, Nikki's also beavering away finding the link. And I think she may have just got it in there. Oh, September, have I put the date wrong? I can't see it. There's the link for the survey. Thank you, Dan. That's Dan from Dorset Coast Forum who's just put the survey link in there. Nikki, if you can just share back onto the presentation. She's on the way. I appreciate that we have overrun slightly. Poll number 4 for you, everyone, today. Just to recap on today's meeting, what is your level of understanding now of the coastal processes at Chesil Cove? If you could just give us an answer of between very good, good, basic, and none, that would be very helpful. Oh, there we go. Right, and so some more of you in the good and very good. Next poll, number 5, coming up for you there. Great. Poll number 5. How did you find today's event and the information presented? And this helps us to put together events in the future and to understand how people are finding the presentation on Chesil Cove, and if we can do any more for you to help you engage with this project. How did you find today's event? Just too much information or too technical, just about right, or not enough information? And the results there just about right. Thank you very much, everybody. So that just gives us an idea of how things have gone today. We very much appreciate your time. I apologise that we've slightly run over today, but if you have any more questions or would like anything more, please feel free to email me. My contact details are on the Have Your Say webpage, and from us here at Dorset Coast Forum, thank you very much. Thanks to Esme and Ross for presenting to us today, and we will hopefully see some of you again soon. Thank you very much.